important for the students to hear from the experts with respect to their rights and their responsibilities and what the law actually means for them.
I have prosecuted a number of serious crimes involving teenagers, and there's probably stuff you guys should know about what can happen to you out there, and even when you can innocently be caught up in stuff that you didn't expect to happen. I'm happy to answer any questions you got about the justice system, about the video stuff, about my job.
Yeah. Police officer approaches me and asks for ID. Do I have to show it?
I don't actually think you have to produce your identification. Now, if a crime has happened, right, this is sort of, if the police have enough information to think that you're involved in a specific offense. So this is different than, you know, the hot button issue of carding, where they just see someone walking down the street and for no reason don't like the look of them and stop them, as opposed to a 7-Eleven gets robbed, or you know, a corner store gets robbed, and someone says the person had a red hat and purple shoes, right? So, and is a young black teenager, male, red hat, purple shoes, gold chain. That's enough for a police officer to stop you. It may not be enough to prove that you committed the crime, but if they can, what they have to show is a number of factors that point to you as a possible person of interest. So then they can detain you and investigate you further, and then if the store clerk comes out and goes, that's the guy, that's enough to arrest you. So they can stop you if they have enough information. They can't stop you in what's called an arbitrary fashion. They can't stop you just because they don't like the look of you, or they can't stop you because they have a racial bias, or they can't stop you because they're suspicious. They can stop you if they can tie you in some meaningful way to the information that they have about a crime that's been committed.
Do they have to tell you why they've stopped you?
Yes, they do. They can't hold you for no reason. And if you're going to be arrested, they have to tell you what you're being arrested for. So they can, so if you get pulled over, even many, you know, I wouldn't say many, but probably 8 or 9 times in my life I've been pulled over by the police for, I was speeding, I didn't have my, you know, seatbelt on, I forgot to put the val tag on my license plate, and they have to tell you immediately, sir, I pulled you over because you were speeding, I pulled you over because your brake light was out. So yes, you have a right to be informed of why a police officer is talking to you. Typically, and police officers are like anybody else in every walk of life. There are better ones and there are worse ones. And there's people that are out there working very hard to try and be as professional as they can. And a lot of them, and especially as the force evolves and as people become more sensitive, they are really working hard to build bridges with communities. And you know, part of the reason why I'm here, I want to put a face on like the justice system. You know, we work hard to try and be impartial and fair. But you guys all know that crime happens, right? Serious stuff happens out there. And when it does, we got to do our job and try and address it, right?
Can you get a criminal record for trespassing?
No. Trespass to property is a provincial offenses statute, so you get a ticket, right?
Can you get arrested?
Yes, you can. You can be arrested. So we've had instances where people cause trouble, like there's vandalism or they broke stuff or whatever, and while it's not, no one wants to call the cops or jam someone up for something maybe as minor as that, they'll say, well, you can't come here anymore. If you go back, they actually do have the right to arrest you. A security guard has the right to arrest you and hold you for the police if they so choose, or they can release you. Often security guards will arrest people for shoplifting, right? That's your typical thing. Happens all the time. And the security guard does have a legal right to, if they see you take the pair of jeans, stuff it down your pants and walk out of the store, they have a legal right to go out and stop you and hold you for the police, and then they call the police. Now, they don't have a right to, I don't believe, search you unless there's a security concern, or interrogate you if you don't want to ask them questions. The police can ask you questions, but you obviously don't have to answer them, right? There's one of the fundamental principles in our law is the right to silence. Everyone has the right to silence. Doesn't matter what you're charged with. You never have to say anything. And it's especially important with young people. So unless that young person has a lawyer or a parent present, the police can ask them questions, but they have to read you all kinds of warnings to say, you don't have to talk to us. You can call anybody you want, your mom, your uncle, any kind of adult figure or friend, and you also have a right to a lawyer. And unless the police are very careful to follow those steps, your statement, even if you said, I did it, is not going to be admissible in the courtroom. So I'm here to tell you, I've seen many statements be ruled inadmissible because kids aren't that experienced, and they have greater protection in the law than an adult does. So for an adult, the police will still have to tell you don't have to speak to them, but then if they do, it's much easier to get it into evidence. So you have a right to silence, you don't have to talk. That's the answer to that question. It's one of the basic building blocks of our democracy, right? No one can be prosecuted in Canada if you're under 12. So no one can be convicted of a crime as an 11-year-old, even if an 11-year-old took a gun and shot someone else. Then what would happen is that person would be given a huge battery of counseling and go to see doctors. But you are below the bare level of criminal responsibility is 12. But then as you get older, penalties go up. And it depends on the circumstance we're in, what level of seriousness of the crime. Obviously if we're involving serious personal injury or even death, and we all know that happens, then it's much more serious. But yeah, you have a right to what's called a reasonable bail. So just because you're accused of a crime, even a serious crime, you have a right to be released from custody if you have a good plan that you can show the judge or justice of the peace, right? So someone gets arrested who's 17, has no record, has a great relationship with their mom, and they have a stable family. Mom comes, depending what the crime is. But even people charged with murder can get out on bail if there's a good plan. It depends on what the person who's deciding, usually a justice of the peace, decides. But if you are out on bail and then you commit another crime, then you're much less likely to get released. So that judge or justice of the peace will say, we gave you one chance, and then you blew it, and now you're back, and then depending on what the situation is, you could easily stay in custody until your trial. Sometimes people are out on a couple of different releases, but at some points, it becomes a lot more difficult to get out. The law is a blunt instrument, right? It doesn't always take into account what's happening at home and what's going on, the lack of resources or support or education or positive role models, and you see sometimes kids get caught up. The most upsetting for me is when I see like the kid that's the follower that gets caught up in something serious that they never meant to happen and they never meant to be involved in, but they went with their buddies and now they're in jail, right? And I see that all the time. I had a kid who was, there was 3 or 4 16-year-olds, and what they were doing was snatching women's purses at the Finch subway station. And they would run up and they were targeting small Asian women, and they would run up and just grab their purses and shove the ladies on the ground and take off. And they were caught, and one of the ones, the biggest kid, was like a 17-year-old boy. He was very big, large, I can relate to that. But they tested him, and he had a sort of mental impairment. So he was, while bigger and older than the other kids, he was much younger in his actual mind, right, in his mental development. And he was just led down the path by these older kids, right? So that I found quite upsetting. And we didn't end up prosecuting him. We sent him off to get counseling, and because he didn't have a criminal record. And he was living in a group home at the time and had a very difficult family background. So he understands how someone like that, who's looking for acceptance, looking to be part of a group, and has no support at home, can find themselves caught up and then spends the night in the police station, right? And that you could, in a different set of circumstances, if that woman that he pushed down on the ground had fallen and hit her head on the pavement, and then had a very serious injury, like a broken neck or something, which has happened, then he doesn't get out of jail. There's different rules for kids, for teenagers. It is easier for teenagers to get out, but take it from me, jail's not where you want to be. It's no fun.